Hello and welcome to Night Clerk Radio. This is episode 147. Nobody Here, the documentary, the review, the episode on Night Clerk Radio.
The legally obligated, nobody here content if you're in the Vaporwave sphere.
Yes.
But we're doing it nice and late because, I don't want to feel like I'm SEO milking, which I've talked about before. So I don't want to be reactionary.
Yeah. If you aren't as tuned into the Vaporwave scene as we are, back in 2020, there was an IndieGoGo fundraiser that raised 59,000 pounds, almost 60,000 pounds, by 1,316 backers, including myself.
Saw you in the credits.
I'm in the credits to do a documentary about Vaporwave. 2020 was a tumultuous time, so it took them a while to get it done. But they did, and it's out, and it's got a soundtrack, and it's a feature-length thing. It's an hour 52, and we've watched it. I watched it live, or the online premiere, which featured a Rick Rolling, and 500 people, including a bunch of the people in the documentary, all chatting about it. Then I rewatched it because it's now on YouTube, so you can just watch it for free, legitimately, or you can buy a high-quality download from their Gumroad or some online storefront, and it's very interesting and worth watching, even if you know nothing about Vaporwave or if you know a lot about Vaporwave. I think there's something there for everybody. But, there's a lot to talk about. So, hi, Burke. And
hello.
Where do you want to start with this?
Yeah, it's a tough one for a lot of reasons. I sort of realized, I don't know, I have stuff to say, but I feel like none of it matters because, I'm not really in the scene. And there's no point in, commentating or, re-legislating stuff I wasn't around for, because the bulk focus and a lot of the interviews are people who were involved, functionally from the start, right? It's really that, I guess, even by its own sort of opening title, it really thinks about itself as starting around 2010, right? That opening title card of, 2010, all these artists started to emerge. And a lot of those veterans are who the bulk of the interviewed people are. So, and I wasn't around for that, right? I had, as we've said before on both this show and Hot Takes, I stumbled across Echo Jams by accident because I thought it was fucking Echo the Dolphin. But it didn't take over my whole life in the same way. I mean, it still hasn't, but I never was immediately into it. Floral Shop exists in 2012, 2013, probably. But there was a time when I was so busy getting real life back on track with grad school and stuff that music became a thing I didn't really consume. It was just in the background. I didn't really think about it. And I think through that rise of mid-10s, 80s nostalgia, a lot of what ended up in the background by chance happened to be that 2015 era of 2014 synthwave and some synth ambient, Time Cop and stuff, that sort of pre-Stranger Things era of 80s synthwave revival, Blood Dragon, Far Cry soundtrack, that type of stuff. Yeah. Into 2015's and onward Vaporwave leading up to here now. So the bulk of the time they're talking about, I was just listening to it. And I didn't know anything about what was happening. I didn't really know about, in any reasonable sense, about the, Vaporwave is dead, Vapor versus Hard Vapor, Dream catalog split. Until much, much later. I mean, even in probably the first year or two of the show, I knew it happened, but I didn't know how serious it was. We've talked about Dream Catalog albums at that time, 2020, 21, just as a normal thing. I had no idea, what it had actually gone down. And in some sense, I still don't, because it's kind of locked away. It's sort of, oral history almost at this point.
Inside baseball.
Yeah. Other than it affecting people who are now 5 years later of doing the show, people I talk to regularly or are friends, and knowing how it affected them, I guess I have opinions, but they're these weird post-facto hindsight opinions that aren't really worth commenting on, quite frankly. So I'm not going to get any of the controversy or anything like that, because I just don't know. I can't really talk about it. I can talk about the documentary as a crafted piece of visual media, which I know a lot about, which is very good. It's very well done. Yeah. I think it's incredibly ambitious. I think, even though maybe I've only done it once or twice, I sort of retrospectively feel bad about doing some jokes about it taking time or never coming out. Because I guess I didn't really appreciate, how ambitious it was. Not just in terms of content and scope, but style. It looks great.
Yes.
It's a Talking Heads interview. There's so many. Everyone is done differently. There's no two that are the same. It's not we had, a chair and everybody comes into our BBC studio and sits in the same chair and answers like the same 5 questions. You've got everything from people like in their studio, I assume in their studio, to just chilling in front of green screens, to sitting, Dan Mason's like sitting on a bench outside. It's like, it's all over the place visually in a good way. Like it's varied. So there's a ton of effort, ton of traveling around and talking to people. So that's an incredible amount of effort that I just didn't appreciate until you see it on screen, quite frankly. So apologies there if it was too hard on it. I don't feel like I've ever really dogpiled on it, though. I can't in the same way others have. So that's great. All the visual bits and pieces between and over interviews are great. Like little bits of commercials, concert footage.
Yeah. The concert footage.
Yeah, especially some new concert footage, because this had a softer, I guess like a true debut at, I want to say Flamingo Fest. That was the one that makes the most sense versus now back in August. Yeah, it was August at the 2025 Flamingo Fest was like the actual like premiere. And there have been some changes since then. Like I talked to Selden Dream Suite a bit because they were at the premiere at Flamingo Fest. And I talked to them a lot because they're a friend of the show and a fellow Star Trek referencer. Just gives him a special place in my heart. And, he didn't really outline a bunch of changes. I guess in that time frame, you can't expect it to be like a whole new film.
Yeah. There's just more refinement and polish.
A little bit. Yeah. Like, he said that the opening soundbite from Daniel LePatin was new. Some of the 3D modeled living room stuff were new. And a lot of the end footage that was from Flamingo Fest 25 is obviously new. And some of the closing thoughts on the current state of the genre and stuff. And that was some stuff was maybe rearranged a little bit, but wasn't really sure. So that was our man on the street, Selden Dream Suite, checking it out, reporting back.
Yeah, getting the inside scoop on that.
Yeah.
Right.
So overall, though, I if you want to stop listening now because I've been talking for 5 minutes, whatever, it was good. You should check it out. You should support them. I think it's $5 to get the HD version at the store link you mentioned. Go to the show notes, grab a good copy of it. This is exactly the kind of curation that I think matters, even if it's incomplete or imperfect or there's criticisms of it. We have to, as a community, make it viable to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Else it's just going to die out.
I mean, you raised a lot of good points. I think
I know, that was a lot of talking.
It's a lot to address. So before we get into the documentary itself, in some ways, I want to talk about sort of this broader trend of crowdfunded specialty documentaries that I've seen this trend for a long time now, that there's this niche of documentary filmmakers who make specialty topic documentaries, especially about cultural things that appeal to a niche audience, but that's the kind of thing that does great on IndieGoGo or Kickstarter or whatever crowdfunding platform you want to reach. And nobody here exceeded my expectations because I've watched several of these. Like, as you mentioned, the average thing is a talking head documentary where people are just brought into a room and they talk about whatever. I've seen a couple In Search of Darkness, and there's one on Freddy Krueger, the entire series of films and TV show. There's also In Search of Tomorrow, which is made by the same people who did In Search of Darkness is about 1980s horror. In Search of Tomorrow is about 1980s sci-fi. There's Lords of the Synth, I think, which is about synthesizers, the actual hardware. There's one also about synthwave.
Rise of the Synths? Is that different?
Yeah, Rise of the Synths. That's it.
Okay. I didn't know if there were two of the Revenge of the Synths, Lord of the Synths.
I knew it was some very dramatic title.
Synth Strike Back. Yeah,
and I've watched several of these and seen clips from others to kind of know that they have a formula and they stick to it because they know people will love it. They will love John Carpenter's, the assistant AD on The Thing, talking about what John Carpenter did this one time, and it was great. And that's why this is the greatest horror movie ever made. Or whatever. It's very laudatory, and they're fine, but a lot of these crowdfunded documentaries are also kind of I would call them indulgent because they're 4 hours or longer. And they're really it's really you were trying to make a mini series and sell it to Hulu or Shudder or some other specialty streaming service. And you just couldn't do it. So you're okay, we'll crowdfund it and we'll just throw it out there and those fans will eat it up. And I thought nobody here was going to be along those lines, but as you mentioned, the visuals and the style and it's under 2 hours, hour 52, including credits, and was remarkably restrained because, like, with a niche topic like this, you could just get an endless number of people to interview and just get clips from and just go on and on and on. But like In Search of Darkness and some of these others are just, they get lost in the details. There's not really a narrative through line other than like 80s horror movies were great or 80s sci-fi movies were great. They don't make them like this anymore. And you know, that kind of, oh man, you were great. You were right to love this stuff. It was awesome and better than whatever they're making today. That's kind of the undercurrent in a lot of these. But like Nobody Here is more, has a stronger narrative structure in terms of like, what is Vaporwave? How did the term come to be? How did it come to rise? Who made it and why did they make it? And where is it going? Like what are the trends? And in that case, it kind of gives you a sort of a broad overview of what Vaporwave is. And like, there's a ton of artists that you could look up. And like, if you want to learn more, you can easily research any of these artists and come up with some great music to listen to. So just off the bat, it exceeded my expectations because it was not like made that indulgently. But yeah, I think it does about as good of a job as you could do in terms of like balancing between like, what is Vaporwave to people who have no idea what it is, to here's the inside baseball, here's the inside scoop for like you diehard fans who've been listening to this and following the scene for the last 10 years or whatever. And like, you can't, if you cater to one too far one way or the other, it's going to lose the appeal. So I think Vaporwave is such a niche topic. It's kind of impossible to make something that would totally satisfy either audience without sacrificing the other, you know? But so I think it struck a fine balance overall between the two extremes. So.
Yeah. And I think that's one point I was going to make, but I stopped myself before I went for another 2 minutes, is I do think that balance is done very well. Because I was thinking about like, I don't know what our audience looks like. I don't think of us as having one, quite frankly. But I was wondering if like people who listen to this podcast who are maybe on the fence about it, if they're like the perfect audience for this. So I'm sure we have tales of people who maybe don't care about Vaporwave that much. They like you through our PPR and they support your circle of what you create. Or like to listen to you talk or are just curious, passerbyers. And then I think there's a tale of people who are artists and producers, you know, like Christ has commented on the show on like Spotify and stuff. So like, that's somebody who knows we're idiots and they still listen to the show. So, but I have to feel like in that normal distribution, that Gaussian, there's got to be a center of people who are pretty interested, maybe don't know as much about like 2010 to 2015 Vaporwave, because it's not something we can really talk about that much. Like I don't talk about any bit of the scene that, you know, I don't want to talk about any bit of the scene that authoritarian. Or is that as an authority? But that's especially an era that's just kind of the dark ages to me. And the Vaporwave documentary, Nobody Here kind of, you know, makes that clear, because there's like St. Pepsi and Mesh and others talking about like, oh yeah, you know, a lot of this stuff came together in a Facebook group of like 25 people and it never opened up. It was just me and Luxury Elite and St. Pepsi and blah, 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 blah. And that's all gone. I imagine. For the most part. Maybe, or
they migrated to a different platform. I mean, I remember.
Or it ends up somewhere else, but there is like, and I'm sure there are all these micro discords of like 10 artists doing stuff, talking about stuff now, making history. So I think it does try to capture that. And I think that's interesting. It goes up through, I think from timeline 2010 to kind of COVID and then kind of resurgence post COVID, but sort of talks about the genre and the evolution. It doesn't really have many interviews from newer artists.
Yeah. It is more focused on the beginning of Vaporwave, its foundation, rather than
and like
Vaporwave
where it's at now as of like 2022, 2023.
Like they mention Barber Beats at the very end, which is
and Macro Blank is interviewed. So that's, you know, somebody that is a more, you know, recent force. I think the other half of that is that I think the structure of the documentary does a very good job. Like you said, it's fairly linear in time. It jumps around a little bit. You know, especially through the like 2014 through 2017, really 2013 through 2017, you know, the rise of the like Adam Harper article and that kind of controversy. And then like through like, you know, Dream Catalog and stuff. It's a little back and forth there. Not terribly so. I think what's interesting, and it was a conscious choice to not have like, there's not like a strong authorial voice. It doesn't have like a narrator. He's like, and then in 2013, Anthony you know, it's all oral history. It's told through interview. And according to some of his conversations, those interviews are not like that strongly guided. It's a lot of like just broadly letting people talk, was my understanding. And, you know, driving that conversation in some of the same direction so you can cut between people talking about the same stuff. But it was largely just meant to kind of like speak for itself. And I think that's a pro and kind of carrying you along through a lot of strains of competing thought. And it's nice that it's not afraid to, even if it doesn't cover stuff as deeply as it should, maybe at times for length or preference or whatever reason, it doesn't really, it's like a weirdly said, it doesn't really take a side, you know, it just kind of lets both arguments sort of exist.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of say like, you know, it covers a bunch of like little micro controversies of like, is Vaporwave sample free or not? Is it anti-capitalist or not? Was the Adam Harper article good or bad? You know, what does it mean to sell out in Vaporwave? Is Vaporwave punk or not? And just kind of lets both of those sort of happen, which I liked through a wide range of guests. I think it gives me a very natural, which I don't get very often. It's almost parasocial, where I just want to like every like interview point, I want to be like, okay, but what about the, you know, I just want to talk to those people. I want to be in that conversation. I guess
we could probably do that. We could probably get those people and talk to them.
You know what? If I wasn't so stupid about interviews, I probably could get a lot of people to come on the show and talk to me about it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I was watching. I was like, man, I bet I could get Grafton Tanner to come talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I bet Michael Brown would come talk to. He follows us on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
The guy who wrote the Eyeliner book. He'd probably come talk to us. I don't know if we can make it work. I think he's still in New Zealand. I think he's
the time zone we'd have to work out. But that's a solvable problem.
That'd be really putting the night clerk probably to make it work between the two of us, because he's the guest. You don't want to be convenient for him.
Yeah,
I'd be
exactly.
Like, you can come on our tiny little show.
Yeah, at 4
you got to do it at
3
3 a.m.
Yeah.
Sorry, take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it. Yeah. We can make or break you if you want to work in this town again. Vapor Town. Yeah.
Oh God. But anyway, I think that not letting those sort of contradictions play out through interviews, it worked very well.
Yeah, it's the right angle to take in this kind of documentary.
Yeah. And I think if you want to read more about this, sorry, one last thing. This is very well highlighted there's a Leah Murphy from Listen Court, like wrote a review of W here shortly after it came out and sort of highlight some of this. And it's a good read. I like his writing. Listen Court is cool and should be supported. Okay, I'm done. You can talk now.
You know, you mentioned earlier how the group chat, one of the, I think it was like Xerox Superheroes or something like that, Facebook group chat that's mentioned in the documentary, had like 25 people on it. One of the things I really like is this is kind of showcasing how I think a lot of artistic movements start and spread. Because if you read like most histories of like artistic movements, I'm thinking of like, I a couple of years ago, I read this book on Magritte, and I talked about how he would go out and have dinner with the, Picasso and these other surrealists, but then he would get in these petty arguments with them, and he didn't like him because he was like this and he was like that. And, a lot of these major, incredibly influential artistic movements are started by just like a few dozen people at most. In one particular area or one particular region, they can work and talk to each other, and something sparks and excites the public, and it just takes off. And Vaporwave is like that. It was just like, it's very infancy, just a few dozen musicians and producers and people on the internet who are like, oh yeah, there's something to this, and building on each other. And like everyone was influenced by everyone else, and also like broader cultural and political trends, like it's weird that Vaporwave got started after the global financial crisis. I don't know how that happened. That's weird. And so it kind of shows these kind of patterns. I think are the structure of how Vaporwave started is representative of so many other artistic movements and cultural movements. So it's interesting to watch, even if you're not like, if you're not a huge fan of Vaporwave, I don't know why you're on this podcast, but thank you for joining us.
I had that exact same thought when you were doing the intros. Like, yeah, if you're listening, you don't really know what Vaporwave is. It's a good, I'm like, who is that listener?
Hi, Mom. My mom. That's it.
Oh my God. Hi, Mom.
She likes listening to the podcast. So
yeah, but by listening to it for 5 years or whatever, I hope she knows what Vaporwave is.
Probably. I don't know if she listens to it.
Almost certainly. You can hope.
Maybe people who discovered this on YouTube for looking up reviews of this.
Yeah. Welcome.
Welcome.
Sorry. Welcome. Welcome.
I think by mentioning kind of like by focusing on the beginning of it and the start of it, it kind of like at least tries to document this history, which, as you mentioned, is very ephemeral. Like a lot of these are in group chats that will only ever be accessed by a few dozen people. I'm kind of reminded by that because, you mentioned Eyeliner, this is, the book that we're reviewing for the Patreon talks a lot about like how he's in, very minute, very small group memberships or discussions on IRC chat rooms, and that kind of thing that just disappears into the void as soon as they happen. Yet they influence the artist who create something that influences countless other people. So, the mimetic spread of ideas and their mutation from one person to the other is fascinating. And Vaporwave is a perfect example of that kind of spread. Obviously it is kind of like a Vaporwave is great and laudatory, but like, I like that they talk about, especially towards the end, is Vaporwave going to die? And, is Vaporwave, well, yeah, it'll probably die. They'll be reborn. And like, maybe we need another documentary in a couple of years to show what happens in the 2020s with Vaporwave. But
yeah. I think it did have a pretty good, strong ending. It does talk about the rise in popularity and like, what does it mean to be mainstream? Mm-hmm. I think that was a generally good, interesting discussion because people like, they make this point, like Daniel Lopatin does like major, I don't know if I don't know if the Uncut Gem Soundtrack won awards. I should, but it was it's like a huge, doing like big Hollywood soundtracks and producing for huge artists and stuff. And, Clanton's doing Billboard stuff and,
I mean, that's the thing is also like the relatively small number of people involved for something to even be popular. Like George Clinton talks about how like some of his songs would have charted on billboards if he had managed to like send the numbers to Billboard.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize. I guess you have to self-report, which I didn't realize. That was interesting. Yeah. I don't know exactly how that works.
Yeah, yeah. And, a lot of these things are, even though we hear about them and they're major cultural movement, there's relatively small numbers of people involved. And even with the fandom, it still creates something that other people imitate. So, or are influenced by. It's fascinating to think that like, even like, it makes me wonder about like what other things that we think are huge and involved, it's the big leagues and stuff like that. But really, when you come down to it, it's just like, again, a small group of really motivated people with special interests and knowledge and just hyper fixating on something. And it does talk towards the end as well as like the commercialization of Vaporwave, talking about vinyl records being released and cassettes and record labels and like, George Clinton trying to create a competitor to the mainstream record industry or music industry. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, I like George Clinton's music, but it's not, I don't know. It's just an interesting.
Doing some big touring. It's interesting. It's hard because like I think competing against that mainstream is in kind of this democratized era of release, which is another thing they go into is like digital platforms and just the ability to kind of release whatever you want. You don't have to ask anybody or get a record executive's permission to print a couple hundred vinyls and sell them or whatever. Which also comes up in the Michael Brown's book on Buy Now, of course, is the low barrier to entry, that interconnectivity between like-minded people where you can all of a sudden find a lot of people that are into the same stuff that you are and build an audience and just find people who are into your art in a way that you couldn't before. And I think, a big part of that is competing against that doesn't have to mean that you become, the next RCA or something, right? To use like a really dated record label reference. So I think in some sense he has or is succeeding in that. I mean,
that's fair.
Very, very successful and done some, large tours and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
It's very interesting. Or I didn't realize because I'm so out of that scene. I didn't realize like Young Bay did like an Apple radio show,
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, look to see if it's still going on. There is a little post addendum at the very end of the movie talking about how the Midnight Store, which was a physical store, and they're going to actually close down while they were making the documentary. So
Donner Lenses. Midnight Store. Yeah.
It just makes me. Yeah. I mean, as a snapshot of what Vaporwave was and is from 2020 to 2026, which is the time it took them to make this documentary, I think this is invaluable. So like, this is something like I'd want to revisit in 5 years to see where, where the art is now and where's the movement, and of course, I want to see the sequel, to see artists like Dreamcastle and a lot of the artists we reviewed on Night Clerk.
Yeah.
What are they doing? And what have they done?
Dreamcastle just put out a book.
Yeah.
Dreamcastle just put out a novel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like really, that entire multimedia aesthetic is another thing, which I really like. I think the documentary really drives that home, and Mesh, talks about also kind of the visual side of it being important. But again, they just really crush it on the visuals on that show. If you look at who's responsible for the visuals, it totally makes sense.
Yeah. Everyone really showing off what they can do,
Yeah. If you have time, a little bit of time and money to do it.
Also, I'm going to love this documentary because when they talk about the kind of releases Vaporwave it says, they mentioned the wax cylinder that Equip did. And
yes, we're wax cylinder owners.
We're wax cylinder owners. We're 1 or 2 of the 20 people. We're 10% of the.
You mean Dan Mason and a bunch of other people? whoever else in the other 17.
It literally sits on my mantle above my TV.
Yeah, so. It's one of my most. I agree with Dan Mason. It's one of my most prized physical possessions. Is both of those wax cylinders, because I got one of each.
Oh, I only got the one. I
got the blue and the red.
I think I just got the blue because I was.
Yeah.
It was. God, yeah. It was a little pricey to get both for me, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, I love them. Mm-hmm. I love them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's again. I'm glad that this documentary exists. I applaud the people who made it. And is it perfect? No, I don't think any documentary can be. I think it's a record of a movement as it began and is continuing on into the present day. But it is. There's a lot of things it probably got wrong, like some of the controversies they talked about, like you mentioned the Dream Catalog thing and others. But like, I
don't know if they got wrong. It's just incomplete. Yeah, I think is the criticism.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's fair. And maybe they couldn't. It's incomplete because they just don't have access to the doc, or it's a editorial decision because it's about the broader genre rather than this one particular thing. And they have to cut some stuff. They don't want to wind up with a 4-hour every single interview in its full length miniseries.
Yeah. And I think Enzo talked about that a bit, and that also just some artists, for whatever reason, in their interviews just didn't go into it as deeply.
Yeah. That's their choice. But like, then we can't know what happened if you don't tell us. Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see if something comes out to cover those gaps or,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard but it is a hard thing to make because even though it feels long ago, it's 10, 15 years, right? It's still kind of hard for a documentary to be made by the people who are involved, like making a documentary about yourself almost. Which is not really what's happening in some sense, but it's so close in time, right? You almost get into like, this is an overreach, but we'll name drop. You almost get into like this nostalgia mode Jameson stuff of like, you can't talk about something while it's still active.
Oh yeah.
And Vaporwave, still is.
It's a moving target.
Ongoing, and it's a moving target and it's evolving. So it does its best, I think, of capturing a particular time and a particular rise in a set of artists that launched it. But it's a tricky thing though, because it is so niche that, Ken Burns III is not going to do a Vaporwave documentary probably in 70 years or whatever.
I mean, synthwave, sure, but not Vaporwave.
Damn.
Yeah.
Maybe. So it's hard, right? You're trying to comment on something you're embedded in. And I think they did just about as good a job as you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
For such a difficult, ephemeral, weird topic.
Vapory, you might say. Yeah.
No.
No, you don't want to.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know what you're referencing.
Just vapor, like, the state of matter where it's just,
Don't understand the question and I won't respond to it.
Okay. Yeah. But it's free. You can just watch it and you can give them some money if you want to. Yeah, but it's out there. Go watch it or don't, but you should. Thank you so much for listening. Our next episode, of course, is going to be new music for May. But we're also just going to give you a little teaser for June, which is June is going to be Boards of Canada month. Why is that?
Yes.
Well, they're releasing a new album after, God, how many years? Quite a few. Yeah.
It's been a while.
Been a hot minute.
But a new album.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to do 2 episodes. I don't know. Like, I put it in the show notes like an idiot by accident, even though you are completely correct that next we're doing main music. I guess I just got excited.
I think literally the last album was released before Vaporwave existed. I think it's been that long, or maybe around that time.
Been that long? Oh my God, I'm so fucked up.
It's been a hot
2013.
minute. Yeah.
2013.
Okay.
So not quite.
But close.
So 13 years, yeah. I am excited for Boards of Canada month. So we're gonna do 1 episode on their classic discography, and then for June new music, we'll do Inferno,
just
the new
dive
album.
into one album, yeah.
And there are ones that we haven't talked about. Like, I don't want to burn up all my material, but they're one of those things where we both talked about how much we love them, but and how they connect obviously to so much of what we talk about on the show, but I feel like we've never actually just sat down and talked about them because at the time they would have come up like at the beginning of the show's run. I just had a lot of dumb, rigid ideas. If we talk about Vaporwave and blah, blah, blah. So it'll be fun to talk about.
Yeah. No, it will be.
Else.
What's the deal with Boards of Canada? It's, like I said, without Boards of Canada, I don't think Vaporwave would exist. And a lot of the ambient music we listen to would not exist. It's an incredibly influential group.
Definitely for sampling in the late 90s.
Yeah. Definitely one of my favorite groups of all time. I don't know how many hours of my life I spent listening to Boards of Canada. So, and I'm going to be racking up some more numbers in June. I'm very excited. But we got new music first. And then, of course, if you're on our Patreon, patreon.com/nightclerkradio, we are doing an in-depth, deep dive review series on Michael Brown's book on Eyeliner, Buy Now, the album, which is a great slice into a influential Vaporwave album and the artist who made it. And it's a really good book. And it's been really fun to talk about it, just chapter by chapter.
Yeah, been great.
Yep. And if you want to reach us, we are on Blue Sky. We have a website, Night Clerk Radio. We're technically on Facebook, and you can rate and review us on whatever podcasting platform you use. Or on YouTube. We're on YouTube. Yeah, thank you. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your friend enemies, tell your Vapor pals, or your Facebook group chat, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, or Discord group chat, or whatever platform you use for group chats. Tell them about us if you haven't already. And
or don't. Okay.
I mean, if you think they like us, if it's the Vapor haters, maybe not. Unless it's an ironic name. All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later.
Bye. Bye.